Chapter 3. It was a cold day. Breakfast, a thick and sticky porridge, left me feeling sluggish. The only thing I wanted was to get into the studio where it was warm and bright. Along with the other boys, I had finished the morning chores. Baldo and I had scrubbed the kitchen floor with water and sand. Now we fidgeted, waiting for the maestro to finish his meal. With a final gulp of his hot wine, he stood up from the kitchen table. He stuffed his dirty locks under his cap and ambled out of the kitchen to the studio. We all got up and followed him, including Melania. When he opened the door, the light in the room was blinding. Baldo and Piero walked to a table, put on their aprons, and began to work with the mortars and pigments. I started toward them. "Arduino, you come here." Melania's voice was firm. She held a broom toward me. I hesitated. "Well, come on. What are you waiting for? St. George isn't going to come down from heaven to save you from the job. Sweep everything well, especially the corners." The broom was heavy and rough with splinters. I dragged it to the farthest end of the studio first and began to sweep. Little black spiders ran from every nook and cranny. There were even a few swinging from the beams. I decided that the only time the studio was cleaned was when a new boy arrived. "Hey, be careful," Marco yelled. Without meaning to, I had hit the leg of his easel with the broom. "I'm sorry," I said, and stopped sweeping. I watched him spread blue oil paint over the background of his painting. "What are you looking at?" he said, his eyes still on the canvas. "Don't you have anything better to do than bother everyone else?" "I was just watching." "Watching? As if you know what you're looking at." His haughty tone made me flush with anger. Of course I knew. "I was watching you work," I answered firmly. "That background is too strong. The sky is never that blue." He spun to face me furious. "Just who do you think you're talking to?" he shouted. "You're nothing but a child. You have no right to correct me. How dare you?" The maestro came over grumbling. "Another fight? Arduino, your father didn't say anything about your bad temper." "I don't have a bad temper," I protested, "but everyone here seems to think—" The maestro interrupted me, raising his hoarse voice. "The only thing that matters here is what I think. Keep sweeping if you don't want me to talk to your father about your behavior." He mentioned my father to scare me, and it worked. I would have put up with whatever came my way, no matter how difficult or insulting it might be. What was really important was learning to paint, recognizing the materials, knowing the techniques, if I ever got the chance. I took up the broom again and began to sweep, my eyes burning. The maestro spoke again, this time to Marco. His tone of voice startled me. "This background color will never work. Think of the intensity of the light and the colors that we are going to give the figures. The background of a composition like this one requires a detailed study of tones and shades. You should know that by now, Marco. You can't just put color on a canvas without defining it first." He sighed deeply as if he had said something of great importance. "Now, clean off the excess paint and prepare a more appropriate shade of blue." I was right. The satisfaction I felt helped me finish my work in a much better mood than the one I had started in. "Arduino, bring me some water. Hey boy, get me that board. Get out of the way. Don't bother me." All day long I ran back and forth, following orders and fetching things. I helped in the kitchen and in the hen house, drew water from the well and chopped firewood, straightened a twisted bellows, shook out a threadbare blanket, and shined the knockers on the front door. Finally, when I thought I could do no more, it was time for supper. I joined the other boys who were seated at the warm kitchen hearth, eating thick soup and a chunk of bacon. Marco got up as soon as he'd finished eating, so just Baldo, Piero, and I were left sitting there. I watched Melania's enormous cat, who ruled the kitchen secure in his place as the mistress's favorite. I thought of Melania's midnight excursion up the stairs. I looked at Baldo, who was eating his bacon with gusto, and Piero, who was taking the last sips of his soup. "Do either of you know what's in the attic?" I asked. Baldo started, then whispered urgently, "I've never been up there, and I never would go up there, and neither should you. The maestro would get very angry." "Of course I don't want the maestro to get angry. I just wanted to know what's up there," I whispered back. I decided not to reveal what I'd seen the night before. "The maestro doesn't want anyone to go up that staircase. He gets furious, and Melania growls like a lion whenever anyone even asks about the attic." "Why?" "We don't know," Baldo said in such a low tone that I could barely hear him. "They say that—" "What?" I asked impatiently. "That the maestro has a dead body hidden up there." "A dead body? Whose?" "Nobody knows." A shiver traveled up my back and to the very ends of my fingers. Piero, who had been listening in silence to our conversation, spoke without taking his eyes from the fire in the hearth. A boy who was here when I arrived said that the maestro kept a strange wild beast from Africa up in the attic. He said that he had heard hair-raising cries and groans. That's horrible. Anyway, I think, yes? Piero looked toward the table where the maestro was going over his account ledger, and then at the counter where Marco, far from the rest of us, was studying the fretboard of his lute. Convinced that no one else would hear him, he continued, I think there is an alchemist's or wizard's laboratory up there. The maestro knows a lot about minerals and liquids, and sometimes he has very strange visitors. Maybe they're just traveling merchants who sell rare pigments and works of art, said Baldo. Piero looked skeptical. Then why do they always seem to be hiding something? Baldo shrugged. They work illegally? They probably sell stolen goods? That's why they're so mysterious. The two spoke calmly, as though the subject had nothing to do with them, as though whatever there was upstairs was miles away instead of right over our heads. I was sweating in spite of the cold draft that came in through the cracks in the windows and doors. Baldo and Piero went on whispering about the mystery in the attic and Cosimo's odd activities until Melania walked by us to hang some pots on their hooks. The subject was changed to Baldo's favorite, food. Later, lying in bed, I heard Melania go upstairs again. Afterward, there were strange creaking and scraping noises that seemed to come from the attic. If there was a dead body, I thought, why would Melania bother going up there? Besides, dead bodies don't make noise. An alchemist's laboratory isn't noisy either, especially if no one is using it. The maestro never goes up there. Unless Melania, but no, she's barely up there 5 minutes at a time. The only possibility is that there is a monster up there, or some strange animal, as Piero said. But why would the maestro have something like that in the attic? All I wanted to do was run away. But where would I go? Out into the cold, dark streets, which Melania said were full of criminals? I want to go home, I thought. But if I went home, it would be forever. I would have no second chance. It meant going back to the needle and thread, back to basting and hemming, and fringing silks, ribbons. And what about painting? Where had my dream of being a painter gone? It all seemed distant now, as if those dreams were someone else's. My head was pounding as though a stone were rolling around inside it, and my trembling turned into tears. Later, rolled tightly in my blanket, I realized that I had to make a decision, and there were only two paths: to leave this horrible monster-filled house and be a tailor surrounded by comfort but bitter from failure, or to overcome my fears and all the difficulties of life here and pursue the dreams that had grown within me on those many mornings at the gallery window. Perhaps because day was breaking, or because I was tired of feeling sorry for myself, I decided to fight my tears and go on with the life I had chosen for myself. I would also try to find out what or who was upstairs.